Thank you very much. This presentation is pretty much bizarre because it's not about a paper, it's about a research project, so about a bunch of papers. Because this is such a project that we have been running for a couple of years now. We've got a grant from Ministry of Education in Italy. So what I'm doing here, I'm summarizing some of the main results on this project, which is basically focused on the impacts of climate change and conflicts, but since the literature already highlighted that there is no question whatsoever that climate change may increase violent conflicts, basically we are focusing on some mediating factor like institutional vulnerability, and you'll see. And this is the first paper is been recently published in Journal of Development Studies, and the other ones are work in progress. So let's go. The first one is about vulnerability. You know that in Notre Dame they have this global project on adaptation to climate change, and they have produced this vulnerability index according to taking into account 6 dimensions. So what we basically do that we do consider the impact of whether or not vulnerable countries are more exposed to communal violence. In particular, we focus on communal violence, which is a type of violence which is not a state or organized violence, but rather is a violence between groups which are interlinked through identity dimensions, basically, that often compete for over scarce resources, for example, in small areas. And we do this analyzing this impact on in both Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia in order to verify whether or not same rules hold. And basically what we found is that vulnerability matters in the sense that greater vulnerability reduces conflicts, but this holds only for Sub-Saharan Africa. It does not hold for Southeast Asia. Just to give you an idea, you see here that the darker regions are, the more vivid region are the most vulnerable regions to climate change, and the circle are the notes, the number of communal violence events, okay? And the same in South Asia. So what we do basically, we use two kinds, the estimation is, the methodology is quite simple. We do consider on the one hand the likelihood of violence or communal violence as dependent variable, but at the same time severity of those events, and so we use the panel probability for the likelihood and the negative binomial regression for the second point. And explanatory variable of interest are the vulnerability index, as I told you, produced by NG-GAIN project in Notre Dame, and the rainfall deviation. What we see basically, you see that in Sub-Saharan Africa, you see that vulnerability as vulnerability is higher, the probability, the likelihood of communal violence is higher. But at the same time, you see that negative rainfall deviation is not. On the other hand, you see the opposites in Southeast Asia. Basically, that vulnerability seems not to affect probability of violence, but negative rainfall deviation does. And so the interpretation of this result is basically that in Sub-Saharan Africa, what really matters is vulnerability in itself. Rather, climate change events do overcome the institutions, the institution able to adapt to climate change. Okay, if you look at the severity of conflict, the results are to some extent confirmed. By severity, we mean the number of casualties for each violent event. So basically, this is the first paper, and the takeaway is that vulnerability matters, but it depends on context, because of course sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia are completely different regions. That means that this is a simple confirmation of a simple rule: one does not fit all. That's to some extent is important, because 75%, 80% of literature on climate change and conflict is on Africa, but is not developed for the rest of the world. Next paper is basically a continuation, a kind of continuation of the famous paper. Rather, it's not about vulnerability, which is of course an outcome of institution, but basically we focus specifically on institution, in particular on property rights, and we check whether or not transparent law on property rights does increase conflicts in the presence of climate change. So basically, what we consider communal violence as well, panel property, the same, but our variables of interest are the existence of transparent laws with predictable enforcement as coded by the VDEM project in Germany, and some climate shock, in particular drought and flood. And what we see, so this is the first regression just to check whether it works. This is the basic point, that if we consider only institution, the quality of institution reduces violence, that's okay with us. But if there is climate change, the story changes, because if there is drought, a prolonged drought perhaps, it means the competition for resources between groups overcome the quality of institutions. It's a kind of trade-off. I mean, institution work, that's okay with me. But if a climate change is too tough, it's too hard, it overcomes the quality of the positive effect of quality of institution. The same is not the same with flood. If there is a flood, the quality of institution matters again. That means that, why? Interpretation is quite easy in our perspective. When there is a flood, the flood is a kind of short time event. That means that institutions, if they are a high quality institution, do react immediately. And so perhaps they are able to adapt to what's going on. When you have a drought, the problem is that the drought is too invasive into the economic structure. Okay, we have done the same story with severity, but results are less robust. So, to summarize, this is the second paper. So, climate change has an impact on violent conflict and overcoming the effect of formal institution. This is the takeaway. Okay, my challenge continues. 5 minutes for another 2 papers. This is a paper that not authored by me, by Chiara Livorno and Luca Tiberti from the other group. The research team is made of 2 research groups. This is interesting because it's related informal institution. By informal institution, I mean they mean the social structure. They verify whether or not the incidence of conflict is higher or lower when there are extended kinship relationships in areas affected or not affected by climate shock. And they do this using ethnographic maps of West Africa. And the idea is basically that they regress the existence of conflict with respect to drought, but this interaction term made of drought, the existence or not of drought in the neighbor areas, and extended kinship. And the result is in this table. That's interesting. You have to look at this. That means that when in a neighbor area there is no drought, in your area there is drought, but you have a kinship, you have relatives in the area without drought, the violent conflict decreases. At least there is a negative association. That means the kinship matters. Is not a panacea because there are some mediating facts they also investigate, but that means that the social structure and informal institution do matter to adapt to climate change. Last but not least, 4 minutes for the last paper. This is a bizarre paper because it's about climate change, but it's about peace. The point is about peace is that any economists believe that peace is nothing but the spillover of economic growth. But I'm a peace economist, and the point is peace is not this one. Jan Tinbergen, the famous Dutch Nobel graduates, maintained that peace should have been a specific target of economic policy. And so in this paper we take Jan Tinbergen seriously, and what we do, that we design a metric for peace, drawing inspiration from the Human Development Index, UCY, and then a policy instrument. The policy instrument is called EDU-MILEX, is nothing but the ratio between public investment in education and military expenditure. You know that usually policymakers consider education, by even economists, education and military expenditure on two different tables, right? People speak about education, good guys speak about education, bad guys speak about military. The proposal is to combine this, because basically what we put is the ratio between the future productivity education against the current waste of military expenditure. So what we do basically is we use this ratio as a policy instrument. And then our dependent variable will be the social peace index, which is a geometric mean of 4 pillars. Health, proxy by life, female life expectancy index, the standard of living proxy by GDP per capita, the quality of institution proxy by the real law index sourced by VDEM, and the spread of violence is proxy by the physical violence index by VDEM, that measure to what extent governments threatens exert violence against citizens. Of course, you can see that there is some correlation with some famous indices, but you can see here that there is a huge high correlation with HDI, but there is also some margin. That means that because our index is different from HDI, even if it takes inspiration. And this is the empirical model, okay? The empirical model, also to have a robust empirical model, we use an instrumental variables. I skip, and these are the results. This is the first stage, you are not interested. So the result is that if you believe that this metric is good to capture social peace at internal level, you see that the EDU-MILEX, our policy instrument, is, how much time do I have? 0, excellent. You see that EDU-MILEX does increase peace, while climate change in the long run decreases peace, okay? I finish. In particular for developing economies, when the social peace index is lower, that means that sub-Saharan or other, you see that the impact of EDU-MILEX on the margin is higher in those countries, developing economies, with respect to the developed economies. So at the end, the project is saying something to us. Violence increases with lower vulnerability to climate change. Legal frameworks work to prevent conflict, if and only if climate change is not so severe. Informal institutions as social structure work to adapt to climate change, but in particular, if we consider peace can be impacted by climate change, but public policy can, balancing education, in particular favoring education against military waste, can enhance social peace. That's it.